Hello everyone. This is a short video on using your soft pastels and maybe trying some new things with them if you're already familiar with them. I just want to go over the materials I'll be using. You do not need these to follow the demonstration, but I thought it would just be nice for your reference for you to see what I'm using. I'm using soft pastels. During the subsequent demonstrations, I'll be using some really high quality ones. Schminky and Sennelier is how you say that. These are top brands. They're very expensive. I don't expect you to have them, but it's worth it to spend the most you can on your soft pastels. You'll notice a distinct difference in the quality of these. The color will be brighter. They'll mix a little bit more easily. I'll get cleaner results with them. I do that so that you can see through a recording the right kind of color. You'll also see me using Rembrandts. If you're going to go to art school or you are going to continue with soft pastels, this is the brand name that I would recommend as a really good, high-end, yet not crazy expensive set of soft pastels. They sell Rembrandts individually, so if you want to, you can build your palette by just getting them a few at a time. Most art students use Alpha Color. That's a brand name, and they have smaller sets. It's really worth your money to get the 48 color set. You'll be using it. Artist Loft is a cheaper quality. They often work quite as well. If I start with Artist Loft, I'd want to move up to Alpha Color. If I start with Alpha Color, I want to eventually move up to Rembrandt if I was going to continue. I will say look on eBay or other places like that for used sets. A lot of times people might get started and end up not using them, which is, I hope, not the case for you. Conte is the name of a kind of stick or pencil. If you see pastel pencils, they're probably Conte. Regular soft pastels would break immediately if you put them into a pencil, but what they do with Conte is they add a little bit of oil. It's kind of a greasy oil, not a lot, and so that way it can be compressed into a stick. The greasy oil helps hold it together, or a pencil. This is not the same as oil pastel. It's much less oil. However, if you're working in soft pastels and you have some fine lines, or you want to touch something up, perhaps you want to touch up a highlight or accentuate a dark area, the Conte will stick on top of the soft pastels. Now, the other thing I'm using is painter's tape or drafting tape. Masking tape leaves more of a residue than drafting tape, so if you have a choice, use drafting tape or super cheap painter's tape. Regular wax paper, some cut up paper bags, some double-sided tape, dollar store El Cheapo, various paper samples to experiment with, a jar with a lid and some screen. I wonder what that's for. Some sandpaper or nail file, a regular white eraser, a kneaded eraser, and an X-Acto number 11. So this is my white eraser. This is a kneaded eraser. It comes square. You use it for soft erasing. When you fold it up like this, you can make it self-erase as it is. It will clean up inside of itself, which you just erased, and you can make funny animals with it, which all art students do. This is a number 11 blade on an X-Acto knife. It's your most standard blade. One thing that you can do with your white eraser is to use it to keep your blade safe, and just put your blade like that. The other thing that I would recommend on erasers is that you might want to sometimes take your X-Acto blade and cut your eraser down, because if you're trying to get into some really sharp areas, make fine lines, really clean up an edge, it's nice to make these chisel marks with your white eraser. So you can create these eraser parts. Apparently mine's not going through. I'm sure my blade is a little dull, which means I shouldn't be cutting with it. There we go. Now I can also make wedges like this to use as a chisel eraser and still use it to hold my blade. So just always watch out on that blade tip. Keep it covered. All right, so those are our materials. In this video, just to keep track of things, here's what we're going to do. I will show this at the end of the video as well, so you can use it as a checklist. I'm going to show you how to prepare your surface. We're going to talk about different kinds of paper. We're going to talk about easy tips on taping your paper and why you should. What to look for in sample sheets. When you break your pastels, how do you blend them? Using pastel pencils and Conte. Using pastel powders, erasers, and various ways of masking. I'm also going to give you some tips. So, let's get started. I'm going to keep this nearby where I can refer to it. Now, one of the things that I highly recommend are rolls of construction paper like this, and I don't mean kindergarten construction, I mean building and construction. I got this at Lowe's, super cheap. I think it was $8 for the whole long piece of it. They use it to cover floors when they're painting, so it's not high-grade paper at all, but it's great for keeping your surface smooth and clean. You want to protect any surface you have down below. Pastels are not toxic, they don't stain, but they can create a film that is a pain in the neck to clean up. So it's a good idea to put some of this brown paper on whatever surface you're working on. You can put layers of brown paper so that if you want to draw on the paper itself, you can just peel one sheet off from another. And I strongly recommend that you put a piece down on the floor underneath you. Now, let's see. Let's get started. On our paper, you want to find some paper that has some tooth to it. Now, tooth means that when you touch it, it feels kind of like a paper bag. This is called cold press. Hot press paper is like printer paper. Hot press paper is very, very, I'm saying hot pressed. It's very, very smooth, like it's been ironed. Well, you do not want hot press paper like printer paper, because when I put color on it and try to blend it, it's got a sizing on it, a kind of finish on it, so the pastel just doesn't blend very well. It also will eventually fall off the paper. So if I have something that has a little bit of tooth on it, it's not going to just fall off the paper. I can much more easily blend it on the paper, and this tooth will allow me to erase more. The hot press will get torn up. So you want to use a good quality paper that has some tooth. This is called a decal, D-E-C-K-L-E, decal, like freckle, but decal. And a decal and edge used to be the sign of a really quality handmade paper. Anymore, they just put a jet stream of water down there to fake the effect, but they usually don't go to the trouble. The manufacturer doesn't go to the trouble unless it's a high quality paper. So a paper with a decal edge that's cold pressed, that has some tooth to it. Tooth is the texture of the paper. You want some tooth with it. HP means that it's hot pressed. You don't want hot pressed. You want cold pressed. That will have enough tooth for you. If it has a decal edge, that's usually a favorable sign. The ones that I use, just so that you know, are Stonehenge. Stonehenge is the brand name of a paper. It's a printing paper, but it has great tooth. It's cold pressed. You can use multimedia on it, and it's just a great workhorse. So I will be using Stonehenge most of the time. When you're selecting paper, don't forget that you can have many different types of paper. It doesn't have to be white. So I might use some of this brown paper. I might experiment with black paper. Sometimes the mood of your piece will dramatically change depending on the color that you use. So for instance, I might put some soft blue pastel on some of this brown paper. and have it really blend in. But I might do the same thing on this black paper and really have it pop. So different colors will look different on different colors of paper. Okay, so consider whether or not you want to have a color paper. Remember, when you're selecting a color paper, that it is possible to erase areas out. So if you have a lot of dark areas, you don't want to use a lot of dark pastels, because that might make the rest of the colors kind of dirty. So you can just come in and erase out colors on some paper. Other ideas for papers, just, so that you don't get stuck. Scrapbook papers can actually be used. I don't know a lot of fine artists that are dealing with the scrapbook paper, but, for fun. So, for instance, this has leaves on it, and this will take enough soft pastel so that if I wanted to, for instance, create something of a forest scene, that is a couple of trees, and then put some blue in every once in a while, I can play around with the leaves that are printed on the paper to see about getting a kind of an interesting effect. So in this case, I'm using a pre-printed paper and just kind of playing around with how the texture that's on the paper might be kind of fun to work with in a drawing, this being the sky. So you can see here, this blends very well. I can add a lot of color to it. So be on the lookout for different kinds of papers that you might use. If, for instance, I have a paper that has a drawing, that has a lot of blue in it, on this one I've taken a piece of Stonehenge, put wheat paste glue, just cheap old, school glue on it, put a piece of tissue paper on it. The tissue paper has a nice texture to it. So if I wanted to, for instance, create a blue sky, I could go into this paper that already has a lot of blue in it, and that blue would kind of show through even when I did, for instance, a sky. And this can create a lot of interesting effects as well. For example, here I took different types of tissue paper and put it on just a piece of Stonehenge. And as I come in here, I might be able to, for instance, add some shadows. I don't know, I'm just real quickly sketching this so that you get the idea. So there I've added some shadows. Perhaps I want to develop the ground a little bit, add some sun. Maybe use a little bit of atmospheric perspective. Pop some interesting extra colors in there. And not be afraid of putting some interesting colors in there. Now there's air flowers, I suppose. Here. Some more flowers. Okay. So I might play around with something like this. And actually, it will take a lot of different colors on here. If I want to, for instance, add a little bit of blue in the sky, purple in the sky to add a little bit of tone. I want to tone this down, so I'm going to put some blue into the oranginess of it. I have another video about that, right? Okay. Here we go, a little bit of color on the ground, mix it up. So you can see here that I can get some interesting effects right away by just changing regular paper with some wheat paste. I could use tissue paper. I can get various types of scrapbooking paper that also comes in solid colors. Black, hot press, deco edge, even paper bags will work just fine. So think about the color and the size of your paper. Now, the next thing that we normally do once we decide which paper we want is we tape the paper. And when you tape the paper all the way around, it does a couple of things. One, it holds the paper down while you're moving, while you're rubbing on the pastels. But it also helps you really see the picture plane. That is, it really makes you see the format, much as though you're looking through a camera lens, helps you see the format. The other thing is that these pastels are really quite dirty very quickly. And if you want to hold the drawing later and not get fingerprints on them, you want to have a small edge so that you can do that. Now, sometimes you can just take your tape, pull it out, take it straight down, and you can decide whether or not you want to use the edge of the paper or do something a little wider. So right here, I'm going to just do this here, and I can kind of feel underneath that I've got about 1/2 inch going on, which is enough for this size. And you would tape it down on all 4 sides. Now, I am not pushing hard on this tape. I don't really want the tape to stick that well because I don't want to tear the paper when I pull the tape off. So I would line this up, patch places like that, and then I would be able to clearly see, I'd make that straight, my format, and it would be clean when I peeled it off. Now, it gives you a really nice edge to work with, so that, for instance, if I'm doing a sky, I'll do this side since that one's messed up, I can come in here, really get in the corners here, and let's say I'm going to make some water down here. It's just random colors, actually. Put some color down here. Now when I peel this up, you'll see that it really nicely defines the edge of this drawing of whatever it is I'm drawing, okay? So now when I peel this up, now something about peeling this up. If you peel it up this way, straight down, sometimes it'll tear your paper. The trick so that it won't tear your paper is to make a 4 like this. If you imagine this being kind of a backwards 45-degree angle. And if I pull it like this so that this becomes a square edge, it will tear your paper less frequently. Okay, so you can see here I'm already have a really nice clean edge. I pull it down like this and I'm not getting any paper pull on it. Going on the cheap paper though. Now, once you have something like this, sometimes you have a problem in that I've taped hundreds of pieces of paper, so the tape isn't sticking to itself and everything. Sometimes you have a problem with tape sticking to itself, and it's a real pain in the butt. And other times you might be trying to tape down a very large sheet of paper, and it's hard to get the edges. So what you want to do when you have either it's hard for you or you have a large sheet of paper, put your tape, see it's hard for me, put your tape sticky side up and tape it down. Do this side, sticky side up, and tape it down. Now, when I do this, it's the tape that's the problem when it starts sticking to itself and you're, cursing because it's all sticking to your fingers and not doing what you want. This way it gets this tape smooth. I can now come in with my paper and see real easily where I want to put that tape. So I might want to put that tape like right here. Press down. I might come in with an X-Acto knife or scissors. Come up. And this one up. And as you see, I can now tape it down without having any problems on it. So if you have, really large sheets of paper, that's kind of helpful to know. Another thing that's helpful to know is that if you're taping paper and you really want it to stick, instead of pushing down on this where it might lift up the paper, if you don't want that, put the tape sticky side up here. Take another piece, sticky side up here. So I've got a little bit sticking on the back of the paper. Once I get this back of the paper done, I'm now going to put sticky side down and hold the paper down like this. Now the paper's stuck to the surface, but when I take the tape off, it will only take the tape off on the back. Now normally I wouldn't use both methods. I use one or the other, but you can definitely use both methods on this one. Let's say I'm taping it like this on a long, narrow kind of panoramic view. tape it like this. Some more. I do my drawing, and then when it was time to pick up the piece, I might just cut the hinge where the back of the sticky tape is. This up, and that way it comes right up off of your surface. So that little tape hinge can be helpful sometimes. I think I'll keep this sample right here. Now let's see. I think that it's a really good idea when you're first starting out to try to have several different samples in front of you, so that as you're trying different things, you know, you might as well take some lab notes on it. So I'm going to just work with a few different types of paper here so that you can see the kind of different effects I'm going to get. I like putting an envelope in the back of my sketchbook, and whenever I'm playing around with a new paper, playing around with a new technique, you know, I might make a couple samples for my sketchbook and just pop them in that envelope. So I've got a couple here. I think I'm going to add, I'm going to just use this for the brown paper. That might be easier. You might have noticed that previously when I did a little bit of sketching, I took a broken pastel. And it's great when your pastels break, okay? Don't worry about, you're not using the pastel like a pencil. It'll start crumbling immediately if you do that. So a lot of times artists will use half sticks or actually break their pastels into these sticks. And what you want to do on this is practice. I'm going to take my pointer finger and push real hard on here, and then I'm using these other fingers just to hold it. So these fingers kind of move the pastel back and forth, and this finger pushes down. So this finger pushes, these manipulate. So what I might do to get started is I might push my finger down really hard and kind of lift up on the back. And when I do that, it puts a lot of pigment here, but not much here. And when I go to blend it, it becomes much easier to blend. And I get a really nice soft gradation there. Most people, when they start out, way over blend, and you kind of have it looking good, and then all of a sudden you lose what you had because you over blended. It's better to consider putting two colors very close to each other and just allowing those colors to kind of stand out as a strong light, medium, and dark. Then blend the seam right at first. I am using different fingers. Once I blend the seam, then I can come back in and soften the gradation. That way I'm keeping the lights, mediums, and darks in very specific places, but I'm not smearing the pastel. Now I can clean up anything I want with my white eraser. I can also use another piece of paper to get a straight edge. I don't have one. Maybe I do. I can also use another piece of paper and erase around that, thereby giving me really clean edges. So you can erase quite a bit with this. Now, if I wanted to put another color next to this, rather than drawing it in, what I would do is I'd keep this mask in place. I would then press against this very strongly. I'm pushing down, push away, and you'll see I'm getting very, very soft gradations there, especially if I move in a couple of different directions, not just back and forth. And when I lift, you see I'll have a real clean color place on it. So when you're working like this, having some scratch paper on hand so that you can do even just a little bit of touches of color, even if they're slight sometimes. can make your color glow a little bit more. All right, so we also have, besides just using the side of your pastel and using masks, we have pastel pencils. And these pastel pencils will generally go on top of what I just drew. So if I want to touch this up, maybe I want to have a lightning bolt in here. I'm just playing with whatever's presented to me. But if I wanted to, you know, detail this out, and then I wanted to get even sharper details, most of these are, I thought I had sharpened them. You can see here that to some degree they'll go over the other pastels. And so if you want really tight lines, you can come in with your pastel pencils and tighten them up. However, if you really want a lot of tight lines, I'd question why are you using soft pastels, because you know, pastels are kind of about getting large areas of soft color, and you know, you might want to think about your medium if you're not, if you're not using the right medium for the right kind of image quality. So you can see there I've got the Conte pencils going on top. The Conte pencils can also be very useful if you just get one white, because if you want to put a highlight in somewhere, most of the time your white pastels are too crumbly, they won't go on top after a while, but a white Conte will completely go over soft pastels to give you highlighted colors and shapes. So the white Conte is worth it. I would not buy a black Conte for shading, because hardly any shading is black. If you want to get a good Conte for shading, I'd use an indigo, like a deep, deep dark blue, because generally if light is yellow-orange, the opposite of yellow-orange is blue-violet, which means the opposite of yellow-orange light is blue-violet. So it's better to get, if you're going to get a white, maybe so for highlights, but getting a blue-violet there so that you can kind of get your shadow colors in would be a decent investment. They're only $1, a couple of bucks a piece, so you can buy these individually. One of the other things that people don't think about that I really like a lot is pastel powders, which you can make yourself. And sometimes I've seen these in catalogs where they will sell you a device for making pastel powders. This is just something I have at home. Let me show you the powders first, and then I will show you about making them. So what I have here, I have a couple of pieces of wax paper, and in the wax paper is pastel dust that I've made. So for example, if I want to do something with a lot of clouds, clouds are not white, they're colored by sunlight. I could take this very, very pale color and sprinkle it where I want a horizon line, and as I start blending it, I don't have strokes. You can't see, you know, any marks. If I want to have a real gentle blending, it's real easy to blend this. Now, I do not want to blow this off. What I do want to do is keep some of this dust off to the side, so I'm very gently brushing it off to the side. Once I did my sunlight color, cloud color, highlight color, I decided, well, I'm going to make this a blue sky, just something real easy for the demonstration. And so I have this blue powder that I can sprinkle on, and when I start rubbing it, if I want to have soft, you know, clouds in the sky, I don't have to worry about having my strokes not work out so well, because all I'm doing is I'm blending powder. Now you can go into this powder and you know, detail it out. You can also start with this powder. If you find a white sheet of paper difficult to deal with, you can always start off by putting something like this together. I could, for instance, have blue and yellow powder to make green. I'm not crazy about this green, but it's green. Now, I would most likely put a lot of different colors there, other than this, but now I've at least got my ground, my sky, in my light. I also, while I was making up some powder, decided to find a nice dark tone. And since I had a little bit of a yellow-orange in the sunlight, I have here some blue-violet. Now when I put the blue-violet in here, I might put some right up in the corner there. Let's make that a little darker. This a little darker. Oop, drop some. I might even take it right here and get like a small darkened mountain range. Whatever you want to call this in the distance that we have going. Now, if I make something and I feel as though, let me get a straight line on that, just by taking my wax paper, holding it up to where my purple line is. Maybe I'll have one range of mountains in front of the other range of mountains. Or if I really screw up, find my chisel eraser and decide I don't want that line there. Okay. So on this, if I were to put too much purple powder, in the corner, and it started overwhelming it, well, all I have to do is take my blue powder, put the blue powder on top, and it'll blend in a little bit better. Now, I can go into this with my various pastels and build on top of it. So if I feel like I need to put some white in the clouds, or I want to put some various tones of blue in the sky, or I want to, for instance, I don't know, make some trees. Make it look like I'm looking through a grove of trees. However I want to populate that part of the painting or drawing. Now, one thing about these trees, if I wanted to make them seem more fluid, you can also take a brush, water's usually wet, right? Wet the brush with water, and just go over this with a wet brush. It will make some ink-like lines, so it makes the pastel kind of become almost like a watercolor. So now that's not erasable when you do that with the water. So what happened with these powders in order to make them was I had a regular kind of canning ball jar. It has a ring lid on it. And I took a piece of screening and put the piece of screening on the jar, put the lid top on it, and used it for quite a while to just scrape the pastel on it, and the powder falls into the jar, and then I just dump it into some wax paper. Now, this is regular metal window screening, and any kind of something that will abrade the pastel will work, whether it's sandpaper or a nail file, an emery board. On this one, the screen started stretching and wasn't fitting well into the jar, so all I did was I just took my pastel and rubbed it, held the screen between my hand and just rubbed it, and you can see I'm getting some powder there. Now, this is a really great way to use up little tiny pieces of something. For instance, I've got a little tiny piece of green there, and if I wanted to mix the orange and the green together, which would make the orange just get a little bit more brown, I can take this green and rub it back and forth until it disappears. And you can see there I've got a little tiny bit of green. So if I want to blend colors like this, I can just blend colors to my heart's content, especially if you don't have a lot of range of colors. This can be kind of helpful. The other thing that you can do is if you need to have a little bit of a tip on a color and you want to kind of sharpen it, obviously you can't really sharpen this with a pencil sharpener, and X-Acto knives tend to crush them. So what I'm doing here is I'm just sharpening one end of this so that when I get ready to work with it, I've got a nice chisel edge on it. So when I blend these colors together, for instance, if I want a brown, I know that when I mix all my colors together, I'll tend to get a brown, right? So I just mix some various colors together randomly, and I might find a brown here that I could use for the trees, or I might be able to put in some brown shadows with my powder. Now, when I mix up the other, so let's ruin this sketch, okay? Just by seeing what happens when you put powder on it. So I can, start adding some different tones like that. Now, when I made the sky color, I took the main color I thought I would make the sky, and I added in a couple of other colors. I added in just a pinch of the sunshine color, and I added in just a pinch of the shadow color. I know that if this is the color of my light, and this is the color of most of my shadows, the sky color will contain its main color and a little bit of the sky and a little bit of shadow, right? So if I tone this down just a tiny, tiny bit, it doesn't have to be very far from what the original color is, but this color will automatically go with this color and this color. So if I have a green that I want to work with in my landscape, I would likely take mostly this green in the powder, but I might take a pinch of this blue into the green, so this green will go with the sky. I might take a little pinch of the sunlight and mix it into this powder at some point to make it look like lights on the leaves. When I go back, I might actually use this yellow color that was the originating color for here to help add some sparkle, but this will add the tone of it. This will make all your colors go together. So these powders can be really great. Now, I keep them just like this in wax paper folded up. I know that, and when you work with the powders, I'm going to put them away just for a moment. So these powders can be really fun, especially like on black. They're really quite beautiful. They're also easy to erase through. So if you make a mistake or screw up, it's really easy to erase it off. Okay. Now, what I can also do here is come in and let's say this did not start off as a fall scene, but let's just say I want it to be a fall scene. See, I can add some layers. You're limited in how many layers of pastel will actually stick to your paper, but using these powders can give you at least a first coat that will kind of help you see the image develop. Now, I have a whole lot of dust on my paper. It's very tight on here. There we go. And I'm going to remove the tape anyway, but before I remove the tape, theoretically, if you're working on just some paper that you haven't taped down for your demonstration purposes, if you blow it off, you're just blowing pigment everywhere, and that's not the best way to go with, getting it all over the place. Next time you dust or blow your nose, you'll see where the powder went. So one thing you can do is every once in a while, pick up your drawing, go like this, and just tap the back of it. And what happens here is I'm going to keep this dust because this dust will be useful in my drawing. The other thing you can do is, like, I don't want to keep the dust, but I want to make sure that I don't have to clean up a lot. Like, you like drawing, but you hate cleaning up. Take a piece of brown paper, fold it in half. Take your drawing, knock it like this. Hit it pretty hard. All the extra dust will come off, go in here, and then you can put it in the trash by using this kind of like a little trough. So the fast way to get cleaned up there is kind of helpful. I think powders work really great, especially if you want to come in later and get any erasing done. My eraser, of course, just got dirty. So I can come in here and erase out some highlights and stuff. And again, if I decide I don't like one area, if I do have soft pastels, I can come in with, with Conte pencils. I can come in with a Conte pencil and add some real specific colors or shapes to go on top of it. One of the things that can also keep your work really, really clean is to use masks on it. So you've seen me several times come in here, and I might, for instance, if I want to keep the sky clean, I might mask it with another piece of paper. And so as I'm going through this, and clean my space a bit, I might come in with this mask and just do a highlight to this to make sure this stays nice and clean. Rub up against the mask, and I'll get a much crisper line. I could come in here maybe with this mountain range, and if I don't like it, I can build up with another mask like this. Now this is to get straight lines. So if I were to have, for instance, a power line going across here, I don't think I would actually ever draw something like that, but let's just say you've got some kind of line going across here, because this isn't too precious. I can even mask like this, and get a pretty clear line or a pole or whatever you want. The other thing you can do is if you take an old credit card, like a piece of plastic or a piece of paper, and you really rub your pastel against the side of this piece of paper, and I'm loading it up as best as I can. I can create really, really fine lines by doing that. And so, I wiggled it. But and this is just paper. Cardboard could work, depending on how thick you want the line. But you can get pretty, good lines going on by using the edge of something else. Also, your paper does not have to be straight to mask. If, for instance, I felt like I wanted to have the edge of a cloud, I might tear something in a kind of random organic fashion, and I'm just getting the area that I want of a cloud. I don't have to be, especially in soft pastel, you're not going to be like too finicky with your shapes. You want to be more loose with your shapes. So if I wanted a second cloud bank, I might come through here, and all I've got is some wax paper, and I can see through the wax paper, which I like a lot. And when I come in here, I can then clean up one little area, and it might look like I've got a white on white line going on there. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with masks. You can create a shape if you want to keep this clean. And when I take this shape, this is entirely unplanned on the image that I'm doing. I'm just showing you what the techniques will do. I'm not trying to create an image here. Okay, I don't like these trees, so I'm going to cover this up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a little bit of double stick tape. Just a little bit. I don't need a lot. And I'm sticking it to my either tracing paper or wax paper, and I'm putting it down here just enough so that it just barely sticks. I can then come back in with another color go abstract for a little bit. I'm always moving away from the edge. You just saw the edge lift up perhaps. My orange has something on it. I don't know what it picked up. Okay, grab that. And then when I pull this off, you see I've got that really, really clean edge, kind of a window-like feel going on there. So these masks can be useful, and see with the double-sided tape, it'll hold this down to the pastel well enough to hold it down, but then it just lifts right up. I would not use this at the, in the final stage, maybe in the development stage of the image. So when we come back in here, And I pull this off, you can see that it's become very, very clean. Now, these masks that you can use can really help you, you know, save time, be more efficient on your drawing. I had a sample here that I'm looking for, and I have not stayed as clean as I wish. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I have a very small workspace. So, you know, this is just experimenting, getting your hands dirty with stuff. But you can see here how you can keep things fairly clean. And then I would use a mask and erase that if I felt like I needed to. Now, masks can be kind of fun when you play around a lot. Previously, I had taken some paper that had a leaf pattern. I said, I might be able to just play around with this scrapbook paper, create a leaf pattern. Excuse me, I'm sorry. This right here is where I've simply covered a sheet of paper similarly with tape, painter's tape. I've drawn a tree on here, and I've drawn where I might want the blue and where I might want the green, and I want to develop this idea a little bit. So all I've done here is I've taken my X-Acto knife and I'm cutting straight through the tape onto the paper. And I can feel when the X-Acto knife hits the paper, and I don't have to worry about cutting through the paper because it will most usually just come off where the knife is cut. Now on this, you will make a thin line on the paper with your knife that will show up on any subsequent pastel work, but let me just show you what I've done. So all you have to do here is you go into all of your lines. Let me get on the edge of that. You just pick it up with the edge of your X-Acto knife. Come on. Of course, with the demo, there we go. Okay, anytime that you demonstrate something, the tape doesn't want to come up. And that's just kind of a law of making videos. Okay, here we go. So you can see here I've got, you know, kind of a rough idea of a tree, and I don't feel like going into being too finicky here with you, and it's just, yeah, I just want you to get the idea. Okay, so let's just say, oh look, I see a tree. I can mask that off, and then if I come in with, say, a brown tone, and all you do is you draw the picture on the tape, and then you cut around all the lines. Okay, so now I know where the tree is. Now I'm going to remove where the blue is. Now, I haven't cut all the lines perfectly, but let's say I want this area to be blue, as in the sky is blue. So I'll take out these areas. Probably had them up here somewhere, but let's just keep with that. And let's say I want to say, oh well, with these trees, I've got a blue sky. I think this is sky. There we go. Then I'm going to say, I'm going to use the leaf pattern, okay? So I've drawn here that this is going to be some kind of bush or something. You know, I don't know what it's going to be. Just a suggestion of a landscape for us. So I might come into this part right here and use some greens that might suggest that you've got some landscaping or something going on. Okay, here too. Now, you know, if you're hands-on, you know the benefit of just jumping in and playing with, experimenting with your materials. And at this point, I'm really not trying to make art. I'm just wrapping my brain around what some possibilities are, and not just using these like crayons or pencils, trying to figure out what some good ways to use them are. So now if I remove this tape, and I've done a fairly lousy job of cutting the tape. I would normally right? Take my time. I missed the whole branch there. But I think you can start to see, here, let me get this off of here. What I've done here, here's the piece of tape. Here we go. What I've done here is I've protected the pattern, kept the background pattern really clean while I'm working. It's not getting all dirty and smudgy. So you can actually create some really interesting effects just by using tape masks like this. Okay, so something to play around with and keep you from just thinking of a white piece of paper is the way you start a landscape. You can see there's a big difference in the approach on these two. Couple of other things. Normally when I'm working in pastels, I will start with the light color and work towards the dark color, and that's because when you're working with a light color, it doesn't take much of a dark color to change it. However, if I'm working with a dark color, it takes a lot of light color to change it. It gets lost a whole lot more quickly. So the other thing is, if I put the dark color on first, and then I come back in with a pale color, I might be able to get a nice clean line at first, but inevitably this color gets smudged and dirty from the dark color. If, however, I start with a light color and then right at the end put in the darks, you'll have less time to pollute your good colors. So start with your light color and move towards your dark colors. Also, you'll notice I'm not doing this to blend. Smudging. Smudging is not blending. Smudgy is just dirty. So when I do want to blend, I might put down one color here, and as I said before, one color here. And first I'm going to blend along that seam. So I'll blend, and I'll blend this one, and I'll blend along the seam first. So I have really good value shapes. And then if I want to blend it more, then I can kind of wiggle back and forth and move it. But I'm not going to be bringing, dirty colors all the way into my piece. So try to blend along the seam of colors. And then the other thing is use fixative. This is called workable fixative. Non-workable fixative is like an acrylic coating, and it will completely coat your drawing so that you can't, it won't get so dirty. If I wanted to use layers, though, I can use workable fixative in layers. So if I started on a drawing just like that, and I really knew I was going to go in and detail this out, I could clean it up, have it first stage blocked in, spray it from a distance of about a foot, and it will hold the first layer in. So if I wanted to, for instance, this is a porthole on a ship and, rigging on a ship, and I wanted to get this looking through the porthole landscape down, and I wanted to get the rigging down before I did anything else, I would clean this up, spray it with fixative, then put the mask on it, do this, and probably spray this with a light coat of fixative as well. It's about 4 coats of fixative before it makes it hard to put any more pastel on it. Another really nifty trick, though, is that if you know that you're going to erase out things like clouds, highlights. If I put color directly on the paper and push it in, and then come in and erase out, sometimes you'll always get a pale blue kind of residue there, like you can't get it completely white. If, however, you shake up your fixative and spray the white of the paper, and just before you get started, spray the white of your paper, you'd be surprised how well that you can come in with your pastel, blend it, and then when you go through with your eraser, you'll get a much cleaner and crisper white, because the fixative has just put a very, very thin coat on your white paper to keep it looking clean. So, you know, you can only have so many layers of fixative on a drawing before it seals it so well. It's hard to add any more to it. But if you have some white highlights, I strongly recommend either spraying the workable fixative lightly all over the paper or in the spots you know you're going to be highlighting. At the end of your final drawing, you want to knock the pastel off, and you're going to be spraying your drawing from about 12 inches away. And what I want you to do is first spray one direction and then spray the next direction. Shake this up all the time. If you don't, it'll splatter onto here and it'll look like it got rained on with really small raindrops. Don't go too close because it'll create a hot spot. It'll look like it's got shellac on it. It's more the idea that your drawing is sitting in a mist of fixative. So if I spray it, I'm just misting it. And then I understand I'm going to spray it in the other direction and just mist it. It's a great idea to do this outside because this is not really good to breathe. Right now my studio really smells of fixative. I don't mind it, but it's not healthy to have too much of it. So, you know, use good ventilation on this. If you can, use it outside. If you want this to be so that it will not smudge and that you can transport it, you're probably going to need to have about 6 coats total of the fixative. You can just keep spraying fixative until the pastel doesn't come up anymore. It's a good idea when you have a finished drawing like this. Oh, this is gorgeous. For you to get a piece of tracing paper or wax paper and just create a sheet to go on top of it. Sometimes some artists will tape it to the back. I am imagining that this is a nice sheet of wax paper, tissue paper, or tracing paper that covers the whole image. But, you know, if I do this, it's just enough to hold it on and keep it from smearing or ruining your other artwork. That should cover quite a bit of experimentation. I hope you experiment with different approaches, making some powders, experiment with different papers. This is what your studio looks like at the end of experimenting, despite the fact that it was organized when I started this. Hope you have fun. Bye.